Let me reveal to you some of the techniques that the bad guys use when they compromise a system. I very briefly, if you remember, mentioned interactive and non-interactive shells. If you remember, we saw a shell earlier that wasn't very interactive in its feedback. So I would have an error message that would not appear. There weren't any progress bars when I'm downloading something, and it wasn't very pleasant to deal with. And of course, as an attacker or as an ethical hacker even, I want to get as much interactivity of the system as possible. So in this section, what I'm going to show you is how good guys and bad guys alike convert non-interactive shells into interactive ones. So let me reproduce one of the things that we saw in the earlier videos. I'm going to be setting up Netcat on my Kali machine to listen on port 1234. And then I'm going to go to my PHP shell that I uploaded earlier. And I'm going to send the reverse shell back to my Kali. And if you remember, this is what I told you is a non-interactive shell. So if I do ls, for example, I'll see the output. However, if I do wget and I try to wget something, I wouldn't see the progress bar or any output. So I wouldn't know if the command has finished running or not. But if I type the wrong command, I don't get any output. But now if I terminate the shell, you'll see all these error messages that should have been presented on my shell being presented on the web page. Assuming I don't have visibility of this web page, I would have had no idea what was going on in the background. Here, now I can tell that the wget command, for example, failed. But assuming I don't have the luxury of being able to see the output on the web page, which by the way is a very common scenario, I wouldn't be able to know what's going on with my shell and I would have had to go on blindly. So what I want to do right now is get access to the non-interactive shell, and from the non-interactive shell, I want to convert this into an interactive shell. To do that, I'm going to be using some techniques that are documented in a pretty cool cheat sheet. But first, let me get access to the non-interactive shell again, and then I can proceed. Okay, now that I have my access back, I can carry on. If you just Google interactive shell cheat sheet, you'll see a number of links that are pretty similar in content. I'm just going to go with the first one, which is a blog by Pentest Monkey. And all of these you see here are commands that will allow me to get a reverse shell. You can get a reverse shell using Bash, Perl, Python, PHP, Ruby, Netcat, and so on. So we already know the Netcat reverse shell. So let me try the PHP. Now, obviously, for the PHP technique to run, I should have PHP installed on the system. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check if PHP is installed by running php-h. And when I get an output of the help, that tells me that PHP is actually running. Perfect. So now I can try to run this command. I'm going to do small changes. For example, of course, I need to change the IP address to my Kali IP address. I'm going to change the port number to 4444 so we can understand the difference now between the different shells that I'm going to be dealing with. Right, so keep this in mind. The reverse shell that I'm going to execute through PHP will be executed through port 4444. And instead of the bin sh, I'm going to change that to bin bash, just because I have the preference for the bash shell. Let me cut this. On another terminal, I'm going to run Netcat again, but this time I'm going to be listening on port 4444. Can you guess why? I hope you guessed because I want to catch the PHP shell. If you guessed that, you're absolutely right. And what I'm doing here is I'm posting the command on my non-interactive shell. I'm hitting enter, and then I'll go back to the other prompt and look at that. This is what an interactive shell looks like. It looks completely different, as if I'm running on the system like any user, like I'm logged into the system. You see the user at the name of the host, the directory that I'm at, the $sign that tells me I'm a non-root user. If I do who am I get the output. If I do a wget, I'll get the output. If I do a command that does not exist, I'll get an error that says the command is not found. And this is a perfectly interactive shell, which is every bad guy's dream on a hacked system. So this is how the bad guys do it, how they can convert a non-interactive shell to an interactive shell. And you, as a good guy ethical hacker, you can also use these techniques on your pentesting engagement. Alright, once you made sure that you fully understand this concept, we can move on to the next section.